President Trump announcing a short time ago that General James Mattis will, quote, retire with distinction this February. That news comes on the heels of two very controversial foreign policy decisions made by President Trump, surprises in their timing, both of them. One, to pull thousands of U.S. troops out of Syria. The other today, that he will do the same essentially in Afghanistan. General Mattis releasing a copy of his resignation letter to the president that reads in part, "You have the right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours." Here now, General Jack Keane, four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. General, good to have you with us this evening. Your reaction to this news tonight.
Well, I'm certainly saddened to see Jim Mattis departing, but I also understand. I think the factors that are contributing to the resignation, maybe not all of it, but certainly are the decisions in Syria and Afghanistan. I did speak to Jim Mattis yesterday. We were both of one mind in our opposition to the decision to pull our forces out of Syria and what its ramifications would be. And I just want to say Jim's a tremendous officer, a tremendous leader, and the quality of the service that he's provided to our country is certainly very, very significant, and the American people are in his debt.
We just heard from Senator Schumer and from Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. She said she was shaken by this, and she felt that all Americans should be shaken by it. Do you agree?
No, I'm not shaken in the least by that. I think we're going to miss Jim Mattis' leadership, to be sure. But I've said many times, I think President Trump has managed to surround himself with one of the strongest national security teams I've ever observed. Jim Mattis was a very important part of that, but he's not the only part of it. And I'm confident the president will be able to find a successor who's very capable and will support the president's agenda and also disagree with him strongly when necessary.
Was any of this, do you believe, about the wall? It feels like the decisions that the president has made really echo something he said all throughout the campaign, which was that he wanted to put America first, that national security was utmost in terms of topmost in his mind. And so he makes this decision to pull out of Syria, which he did say on the campaign trail he wanted to do. I know you very much disagree with it, and you're certainly not alone. Afghanistan, he also wanted to extract us from over time. Do you believe that he had conversations with the Defense Department, with General Mattis, saying, I really want to put our focus there. I want you guys to help us build this wall if necessary?
I doubt that was an issue that would drive a decision like this. But I'm speculating. I mean, I haven't caught up to Jim yet. I will in the next day or so.
When you spoke with him yesterday, was there any wind that this was coming today?
To be honest, no. We were just consumed with the issues concerning Syria and what the implications of that were, for the United States' national interests, for the region writ large.
Do you believe this was his choice?
I accept it on face value that he submitted his resignation because that's what he wants to do. I don't know if there's some other reason involved here, but I don't think so.
Okay. Here's another piece of his letter that I just want to get your reaction to. He said, "My views on treating allies with respect and also being clear-eyed about both malign actors and strategic competitors are strongly held. We must do everything possible to advance an international order that is most conducive to our security, prosperity, and values, and we are strengthened in this effort by solidarity of our alliances." He seems to be disturbed by the president's attitude towards our allies.
Yeah, that may be a point of difference. I don't know because I'm not in those discussions. But I know, and I have believed that the president, in terms of what he was doing in NATO and trying to strengthen NATO and get everybody to burden share properly is a right course of action. I think going out and dealing with China and its malign and aggressive behavior in Indo-Pacific and working with our allies is also the right decisions. And what he has done in the Middle East, his first visit was to Riyadh last July, 55 leaders in a room with him when he said, I'm standing here with you, and I'm going to confront the Iranians with you and deal with their aggressive behavior as they've trampled over your interests and those of ours. And he also talked about Islamic extremism and how we need to get rid of it together. So I think, in a broad sense, I think they both agree on that. But there may be some specifics that I'm not aware of that they disagree. So I don't know why that comment is in there.
You talk about, obviously, there's a lot of changes. General Dunford is out, Milley is in. Your name has been mentioned. I will ask you if you would ever consider taking this post if it was offered to you to be the Secretary of Defense.
I have no plans to go back into public service, Martha.
And that's final.
That's final.
All right, General, thank you very much. I know you feel very strongly, and have always felt strongly, about what a great person General Mattis was in the mix for this president, and that he will be missed. Do you believe the president that there's wiggle room at all on the Syria decision?
Well, I don't discuss any conversations I may have with the president. All I can say is that I do hope he reconsiders, and I'm convinced if he doesn't reconsider, he'll come to regret it.
General Keane, thank you very much. General Jack Keane, good to have you with us as always tonight, sir. Many thanks.
Let's turn to Chuck Todd. Hey, Chuck, good morning.
Good morning. You know, only in Trump's Washington is the shutdown not the lead story. I had to just think about that for a minute. Anyway, sorry, guys.
We're going to get to that in just a second. But you see all these people departing: Secretary Mattis, Chief of Staff John Kelly, Secretary Tillerson. Help put this in perspective, all right? On the crazy scale, how crazy is this?
You know, Hoda, it's a shame that there's been this sense, and I think some people that watch, I'm sure the Today Show think sometimes you say it's a crisis, It's a shame people might be so numb to this, and some of us are so numb. I can't underscore how serious things are right now. I can't underscore the break between Senate Republicans and this president. I mean, just think about this fact. About Secretary Mattis and the president's decision to pull out of Syria. Vladimir Putin cheered him, and the president's Secretary of Defense resigned. That's sort of the stark reality, and you could just see that the Republicans in Washington in particular, I think, feel as if they've been smacked in the face, the hot water drop, whatever metaphor you want to pick. That's the feeling they have right now.
Chuck, Secretary Mattis, as you know, was #1 on the list of people around the president who were believed to put some guardrails in place, who could perhaps be buffers to some of his impulses. Now just about all of those people are gone. What does that mean for the future of this White House as we turn the corner into 2019?
Well, look, I think the president believes he knows what he's doing now. I think the president believes he doesn't need the approval of these other folks, that he knows better, and if anything, he's better off fighting. So I think what it means is there aren't going to be other people, and I think those that are left in this West Wing, those that are left in this administration, if you've made the decision to stay, you've made the decision to essentially fall in line. So I think that means this idea that there are, quote, people that are the guardrails, that idea is no longer operational.
Meanwhile, Chuck, the clock is ticking to a potential shutdown tonight at midnight. Do you think the government will be open come midnight tonight? And if so, does President Trump get the wall or some version of the wall?
Right now, it doesn't look like it is. I think that on December 21st, everybody feels as if they can dig in their heels. Let's see what happens on Monday morning when it's December 24th and the reality that these folks realize that they're not going to be where they promised they would be. The president is tired of this crummy weather. He may be fine not going to Mar-a-Lago tonight. I'll be curious where he is in 48 hours.
All right, Chuck. Of course, you're going to have a lot more on Meet the Press on Sunday. We appreciate you coming on. Tonight, President Trump angry about Defense Secretary James Mattis' scathing resignation letter. A source close to the White House telling CNN tonight that Trump, quote, hates the letter, but hates the coverage more. What is driving his fury in particular is the often repeated line that's been out there that Mattis was, quote, one of the adults in the room, which was indeed the widespread perception of Jim Mattis. And this comes as we are now learning more details, new details this hour about Mattis' resignation. Barbara Starr joins me from the Pentagon. And Barbara, what are you learning?
Well, good evening, Aaron. The reaction of Jim Mattis resigning, saying that he could no longer work for President Trump, has been met with a good deal of dismay and uncertainty across the ranks, I think it's very fair to say. And that uncertainty is something that has commanders not very happy at the moment, because the military doesn't like uncertainty. It likes to know exactly what is happening. So the hunt is on for a new Secretary of Defense that the president has promised. And people will be looking to that person to bring some stability to the situation. But there's another narrative underneath all of this that is beginning to emerge, at least in some quarters, and that is, could Mattis have timed his decision differently? Would it have been better for everyone, including him, if he had left earlier? He knew that his relationship with the president was headed downhill. He knew the president wanted to bring troops out of Syria. And the big issue right now, the red line for Mattis has been bringing the troops out of Syria leaves the Kurds that the U.S. supported there abandoned and exposed to a so-called bloodbath. If Mattis had left earlier, Trump could have brought in another Secretary of Defense, someone who may have had more influence over him and maybe, just maybe, could have convinced him to keep troops a while longer, at least in Syria. Of course, we're never going to know the real answer to this question, but it's the kind of thing that you're beginning to hear people talk about, and people are expressing still an awful lot of regret that Mattis is leaving, but the military is a resilient organization. They will move on. There will be a new Secretary of Defense, but this is going to stick in their minds for quite a while. Erin?
All right, Barbara, thank you very much. And perhaps a bit of wishful thinking by people, right? By the time, someone leaves and you get someone new and you get them confirmed and you get them through, we really think a Syria troop decision was going to wait for all of that. Out front now, retired U.S. Army Major General James Spidermark, senior national security correspondent with the Daily Beast, Kimberly Dozier, and Tim Naftali, former director of the Nixon Presidential Library. You're with me, Tim. So, look, everyone's now second guessing. You have people who are upset he's leaving altogether because he was the adult in the room, and now you have people upset he's leaving because he should have left earlier when you could have replaced him with somebody else.
Well, people need to be upset, I think, because we are a superpower without a strategy. What's clear from all the reporting is that Mattis left because the president was impulsive about dealing with Syria and Afghanistan, which means we have a commander-in-chief who doesn't have a strategy. Yes, America first. It means defending our interests. Well, we always defend our interests. Mattis's letter made it clear to all of us that there is no security strategy of the United States. And with Mattis gone, I ask, what's Pompeo up to? Who is actually making foreign policy for this government?
General Marks?
Yeah, I agree with Tim that when you lose someone like Jim Mattis, you lose an incredibly mature, very seasoned leader who not only understands the nature of warfare, but also understands the nature of management and leadership at the very largest levels. I mean, he's running this large organization. And I think it's a very honorable thing. In fact, what Jim did is, I think we're putting probably too much weight on the fact that the Syria decision might have been the event, the trigger event that caused him to depart. And it might have really been the aggregate weight of 2 years of engaging with the president with a lot of body blows and being the individual in the room that was pushing back and providing some counsel, not necessarily getting in the formation, which ostensibly the president would have preferred. And so Jim raised his hand. He said, Mr. President, thank you for this opportunity, but I can't be the guy to implement what you're trying to implement.
And yet, Kim, allies of this country in the Middle East and elsewhere, would tell all of us, oh, you know what, we've known Jim Mattis for a long time. We know him, we trust him, we have meetings with him. As long as he's there, it's okay. And they would often actually contrast that with Rex Tillerson, who they liked but viewed as impotent relatively when it came to policy, right? Jim Mattis had the goods. You now have been talking to so many of these people, and they are shaken and concerned about chaos, right?
Absolutely. From NATO allies to Mideast allies, neighbors of Syria, caught flat-footed by this, and then compounding that is when they reached out to the people they could normally trust in the Pentagon, in the State Department, in the intelligence agencies, and said, what is happening, what next? And they were told, well, we don't know. That's when the alarm really spread. So I've spoken to multiple diplomats who are concerned and watching closely to see who replaces Mattis. Now, one of the other things that I'm hearing, confirming some of the reporting out there by the Associated Press, is that this phone call that the president had with the Turkish president, that was the pivotal moment that no one could anticipate. Yes, there had been friction with Mattis, but that Mattis was prepared to stay until the end of this administration, and that it didn't feel like to him that this was any worse right now than it had been at other contentious points in the past.
Tim, the thing is here is when you take this Jim Mattis leaving, right? The chaos, the perception of chaos and the reality of chaos that causes. The shutdown now, we are almost 4 hours away from a government shutdown in this country, barring some kind of a miracle. The Dow just had its worst week since 2008. I was sitting on Wall Street when that happened. That was essentially a Great Depression. The Mueller probe is continuing. We now have, more than a dozen investigations into Donald Trump's personal, professional, and presidential life. This is a whole new level of chaos, or would you say no?
No, I would say it's a new level of chaos, and I would say what this is that it shows that the containment of Donald Trump has failed. One of the things that we noticed was that even though Donald Trump was using tweets to cause disruptions with our allies, on a day-to-day basis, the U.S. military was doing the job that it had been doing since the end of the Cold War.
Right.
Now with Mattis gone, we don't know if some kind of Trump disruptor is going to become Secretary of Defense. So the disruption that we now see in the White House will spread throughout our national security structure. That'll be dangerous. It'll be dangerous not just for our security, but the security of our allies.
I mean, how dangerous is it, General Marks? You know, you have people, Democrats and Republicans, right, saying, Republicans, I want to emphasize that this was not a partisan reaction to Jim Mattis, saying American lives are going to be lost because of the policy changes that the president is forcing through. You now have the bulwark, I guess, if that's the word you want to use for Defense Secretary Mattis. It's gone. It's just gone. Poof.
Yeah, he was the individual in the room that was providing what I would call the contrarian view, the notion of the 10th man, where 9 folks all agree, they get on the bus together, and then the 10th person raises a hand and say, no, wait a minute, let's consider these things. I'm not certain who's going to do that. I'm sanguine that there will be somebody who can replace Jim Mattis and come in, and that the mechanism of running this thing called the Defense Department and what the soldiers do on the ground, the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, as a matter of routine, will continue apace, and it'll be done magnificently. At the top, there is chaos. But bear in mind, we still have this large mechanism where entry points and contacts still exist, and those mature relationships now are going to start to light up much more as we try to fill in the gaps, because we simply don't know who's going to replace him. But we have to be optimistic that it will be a mature individual in the room.
All right, well, let me ask you a question, Kim, though, about a mature individual in the room, right? Obviously, the contrast here, the point that everyone is making, right? Jim Mattis was a mature individual in the room, and there weren't always a whole lot of them. And now the question is, can the president find someone who is qualified, who is that mature person and aligned with him, meaning pulling all the troops out of Syria and having a rapid partial withdrawal from Afghanistan? Those two things seem to be diametrically opposed to each other.
Well, there have been a number of names like Senator Tom Cotton. Jim Talent was one of the people on the list before Mattis was appointed. So there are some people who are being considered, but the problem is, do you want this 2-year poison chalice where you will have to wear the drawdown of U.S. troops in 2 theaters, and in one case, a really precipitous
right? He's
drawdown?
Made it clear that he thinks the Syria thing was a terrible idea, right? I mean, so maybe he'll go ahead with it and do a complete flip-flop, right? But when you talk about qualified and aligned, even some of these folks you're talking about don't fit.
Exactly. I mean, Lindsey Graham, Mac Thornberry, all the names that you've heard, except for Jim Talent, which is one of the reasons some people are telling me maybe he'll be one of the people willing to accept this mission. In the meantime, what the Pentagon's trying to do is still salvage at least the air war over Syria to support some of their coalition partners they hope will backfill U.S. troops on the ground. And they're also trying to figure out a reasonable pace for withdrawal in Afghanistan, so they don't do what they've done, what they feel the president has done in Syria, which one senior administration official told me was like a knee-jerk reaction that has left their Kurdish allies in the lurch and will be a message to everyone else who works with the U.S. in future.